All right. All right. The topic for this week was, I guess, what is your favorite story and why? I guess, what do you love about it? Right. So it, it occurred to me that this might be an interesting topic to talk about just because the way I view kind of my life going forward is just kind of, I'm on like a treasure hunt. I'm out there collecting stories. It's like Pokemon, but with stories, right? It's just because by the end of my life, like I'll look back and just kind of, what do I really have? Well, to me, one of the big things I'm going to be looking back on is kind of the stories I've collected. It can be stories about myself, could be stories about just not about myself, just fun stories that I can reflect on and think about, right? And I guess to start us off, my favorite story, or I guess it's kind of a cop out because it's more like a collection of stories, is the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Um, my favorite thing about it is just the wide cast of characters and kind of the types of people they can represent. It's almost like each notable character in there is kind of like, I don't want to say an iconoclast, but it almost symbolizes like a personality type, an archetype of person. And it's always really fun when I kind of look at a person or a situation and I can kind of just cite to one of the stories that's kind of outlined in the Romance of Three Kingdoms. I actually understand this is a very Chinese thing in the sense that, like, a lot of times how people used to judge how educated you were would be kind of how quickly and often you could cite to, like, or allude to historical kind of stories, or just literature in general, right? That was like a sign of how well read you were. But kind of that's just kind of an aside. My story, that's my favorite story just because I really love the characters and how their interactions could so easily translate into situations I see in my everyday life.
Can you cite a specific example of that, Kevin, of this archetype?
So there's a one character in the stories. His name is Liu Biao, and his unique characteristic is he's someone who is outwardly very what was it? Very outwardly seems very sociable and likes to interact with people who are like, very intellectual. He likes to kind of collect great people and kind of gather them into his court, right? Like he's but then, like, in reality he's very indecisive. He doesn't really care about what these people have to say. He's more interested in the fact that he's acquainted with these people rather than actually engaging with them to do anything, right? So, like, I've encountered people who, like, fit that description super well, and, like, it's just kind of like it's always fun when in my mind, like, instead of trying to describe in detail what this person is, I can kind of just he's Liu Biao, like, in person, like, like, that's always amusing to me. Like, it's just being able to, it's almost like stereotyping, okay? And if you kind of cast it in that light, it's not as good, but I usually like to think of it as I get an understanding of this person and I start seeing similarities between the character I know in the book versus this person. Kind of being able to succinctly capture that is always a fun experience for me.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because you use the word archetype, and it sounds very similar to the word stereotype. So what do you guys think is the difference between an archetype and a stereotype?
I'm not sure. I have to see a dictionary.
Yeah. All right, that's cool. Did anybody have any like specific responses to that? Because I was just gonna go off on.
What was the name?
It's called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's a very long, I would describe it like an epic, almost like the Odyssey, right? Like the Odyssey is like a collection of stories. This is very much in that same vein. You've got recurring characters kind of in different situations,
Okay.
kind of going through a particular historical context, I suppose. So yeah, that's kind of like my story that I kind of really enjoy, and I love seeing kind of things in everyday life that kind of relate to it. But I guess that's kind of just my view on what makes a good story, like how relatable it is to kind of things I see in everyday life. How
Melis,
about you guys?
let's hear it from you, Melis.
Wait, hear what?
Your favorite story. Let me
Okay.
guess. Let me
So I'm
guess
guess
from your room decor.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's funny. It's not though. Don't tell my mama said that.
I'll see you in hell.
So is this the story question? I'm just wondering, what is it limited to? Just like anything? I mean, media, book, literature.
Any way you want to take it.
Anything? Okay.
Could be a personal story that happened to you. That's something that you always look back on and
No,
like
my
laugh.
life is too boring.
Or I guess you can pick something from that you've read. It's all up to you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the nice part about how Kevin phrased the question, right? It's not like a book necessarily or a movie.
Yeah, so what's your
it's just a
favorite story? I
right?
do like that.
That could
Good
just
job,
be
Kevin.
something completely oral, right? So it's like anything.
Something completely oral.
Like an oral tradition.
Sounds like
why
August
why
month,
is it that
Friday
that
night.
pops up in my head? Well, to be honest, the first time I saw the topic, when you messaged it to me, Kevin, was Avatar: The Last Airbender showed up in my head. It's partially probably because I've been lately watching it, but I honestly think it's probably I think it's the best cartoon, period. For a number of reasons. I really enjoy the story, especially like the story of redemption of like Zuko. Wait, everyone here has seen the show, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. Just making sure. So. I like the characters. It's got that kind of corny funniness that I, of course, enjoy. The bending and the fighting is like really cool. Like the animation is very well done. I like how the bending is actually based on real like martial arts forms, so it looks really cool when they're bending in the show. Yeah.
I like that. So when you say best cartoon, would you count that with all the anime that you've watched?
That's hard.
Yo, anime is a
cartoon.
cartoon.
Yeah, I'll say yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Damn. That's a claim. Okay. So what about in every format, right? Out of every show, like where's the rank in all your shows?
All shows, not just cartoon.
Including The Office.
Oh wow. All right, I'll say top 5.
Top 5?
Yeah.
Solid.
I'll say top 5.
Yeah.
What about out of all the stories you've ever like read or watched? I don't think The Office is as much of a story as like Avatar is.
Bro, it's totally a story.
It is a story.
Yeah.
It's just not like it's not all about the story, right? Like
that's true. That's not its best part. Yeah, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
The Office's best quality is the story.
Yeah, but Avatar is like 100% about the story, right? That you gotta watch it in order.
Yeah, this is true. But,
so would you say it's like one of the best stories, like of all the books you've read and the TV shows you've watched?
What's a book? No, I'm kidding. I mean, I have to think about it. I actually haven't read books in a while, which I feel like I need to get back into that.
Fair.
Some of these shows just don't have very good stories, So some of the best stories I've seen were, of course, in a book, and then usually they remake them into movies, and they do either okay or they completely trash it. But maybe I put it top 10 if I'm considering all stories, period.
Yeah. I think what I like about that show is like it knew how much was enough. A lot of TV shows don't. Like they kept it at 3 seasons and was super like concise. There's no fluff. So many shows will just they'll drag it on for like 20 seasons or something.
Yeah, people only really consider one episode to be filler in that entire series.
Which one?
I think it's the Ember Island.
No, it's the Great Divide. So Ember Island is considered filler, but there's still like some stuff with plot and character that happens, right? But like the Great Divide was one where like I think it has the lowest IMDb rating. People just hated the episode.
Yeah, I actually.
Lame episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty lame.
That's the one where they resolve the conflict between the two.
Yeah,
tribes,
and he just lies to their face.
He lies
straight to their face.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, awful. Yeah, like in the Ember Island players, like they looked down at the Great Divide and they were like, "Should we go down to the canyon?" And they were like, "No, let's just fly over it."
Oh yeah.
All right, what about you?
Oh, sorry. Wait, I had a question for both Kevin and Malice.
Okay.
Are there any lessons from these stories that you've incorporated into your own lives? Like examples of times I don't know. That's maybe a weird question to be like, oh yeah, I thought of Avatar when I was doing my homework or something. I don't know.
I don't think that's a weird question for me at all. In fact, that's the exact reason why I love Romance of the Three Kingdoms so much, because I'll
Yeah.
find myself in this situation. I'll be like, yo, shit, this is exactly what happened between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao. Like,
So
like
what's a specific example of that? Do you have
a
one?
specific example. Okay. Let's see. Specific example. All right, I'm gonna have to take a moment to recall, but I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, sure.
I can't really say I've learned any lessons that I've applied. Really, I don't know.
But
I just enjoy the show.
Did inspire your
Airbender
Halloween
now, bro.
costume, so
Huh? Oh, it did. That's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a dope costume.
that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people thought I was Gandhi. Oh my goodness.
That's messed up.
I mean, when I'm bald, I look very much. I guess I could say I look kind of similar to Gandhi. Okay. But you know, Gandhi doesn't have arrows, so you know, whoever thought I was Gandhi clearly doesn't know their Indian.
All those people would watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, why is Gandhi airbending? Why is Gandhi flying?
You have a favorite
I
character?
did have a
Melis?
dream once that I was a firebender, though. Oh, that was the best dream I've ever had.
Oh,
and then
so
I
those
and then I
bending
woke
dreams
up.
Bending dreams are honestly like top tier dreams every time, even when you fail.
Absolutely. I woke up, tried to punch, and fire didn't come out, and I was so sad.
Dude, oh god, that's the worst. The number of times that's happened to me in my dreams, failing to fire bend. Oh my god. Okay, wait. So since we've all seen it, to Justin's question, Melis, number one, who's your favorite character? And number two, who's the best anime girl? Or not anime, Avatar girl.
Wait, when you say Avatar, you just mean
Like
girl
when
from
you
the
were
series?
young. When you were young, who did you have the crush on?
Oh, a crush. Because if you're just saying who's the best Avatar girl, I'm gonna say Toph is the best, but I don't have a crush on Toph.
That's objectively correct.
Wait. Okay. Number one, that's not correct. Kyoshi's best Avatar girl.
Nah.
Kyoshi, Kyoshi.
Yeah,
Oh, you Kyoshi the
don't speak to
Avatar?
me. Yeah, the Avatar Kyoshi.
Oh, but she wasn't even in the show.
She was in the show, just not
She wasn't
contemporaneously,
in the
right?
show. There's not enough.
Yo, we saw her murk. Okay, anyway, who is it?
Oh, wait, okay. To answer your first question, favorite character. I think it's Zuko.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, just the whole redemption thing. You know, he went from being a dishonored little brat to, you know, standing up to his dad and, you know, saving the world.
My honor.
My honor.
The wrong side.
And then crush. I wouldn't say I had a crush when I was watching it before. I mean,
Never?
even now, I don't really have a crush on any of the characters. It's not like
Well,
that.
yeah, they're like 12, but
Yeah.
but I'm saying when you watched it, never.
Even when I watched
This
it,
is
I didn't
absolutely
really have
a date
crush.
question.
I'm being completely honest. Like, there was no point in time where I'm like, man, that girl in Avatar is so cute.
Bro, you're crazy. Bro, you're crazy.
That never happened.
No, I'll tell you why you're wrong. Number one, Ira's best character. Number two, Azula. Azula was my childhood crush. It's just because
Yeah.
she's so crazy. Like when I saw her, I was like, I like that.
You
So
know,
Kristen
she's
gets
into
really
some
angry at
freaky
me?
stuff.
Yeah, when
Oh,
Kristen gets really angry at me, I'm like, yes. Oh. She's like, I'm a waterbender. I'm like, no, you're a firebender. I know you're a firebender.
Oh my god.
Wait, what about y'all?
I would actually, I like Iroh, I like Toph. To your question about the female cast, I liked Azula not because she was crazy. In fact, that turned me away at the end, right? I always thought she was very well put together. Like, she seemed like a very excellent and competent person, just someone who's like really at the top of her game. Like, so it might be more admiration. Like, I don't know. Emotions are weird at that age, right? Like, things get mixed together. But I think
I don't know. I didn't have much emotion to process. I just saw Azula shoot lightning. My pee got hard. It's like it wasn't anything complex.
I know what you mean, Kevin. I had some respect and fear for Azula.
Right? Like the other ones seemed very much like scrubs compared to her, because she like had like the physical ability and she had the mental game. Like she's like just on top until the very end where she just completely collapsed. I was sorely disappointed in how that turned out. Like, but back to your question, Justin. There's a lot. It actually helped me a lot at define my relationship with my boss at work. Because I kind of categorized her as a particular character in many ways, kind of in the story. His name's Yuan Shao, and his downfall was indecision. Right, like he a lot of times just couldn't make up his mind and kind of like wish-washed on a lot of key issues, right? And then it just caused a lot of pain for his entire empire. Ultimately, he was taken out by Cao Cao. And so, in comparison, say a different warlord of the time, Liu Bei, like he found someone who was very decisive. He had a vision, knew what needed to be done, and even if it didn't always agree with what the leader's vision was, that person was like very pointed, decisive. He had a very clear plan of what needed to be done, right? And that kind of brought that guy kind of out from like the bottom tier and like really like built an empire for him, kind of out that like that. So I saw that my boss oftentimes was indecisive in that way. It has to do a lot with her background in terms of like, you know, making decisions on a lot of like the specific details, like how should we proceed on these things. So kind of taking that in, I decided like my role kind of as was basically do a lot of the homework and the research, come up with a very well-reasoned and like clear course of action and kind of push that in a very kind of assert that plan, right? And like be a very strong proponent for it and then spur action. And I think that's worked out really well for me. So, you know, kind of that's one thing I kind of referenced what I saw in the story, how different characters in similar situations behave differently and got very different outcomes. I picked the outcome that I liked better, and I tried to copy that.
How often do you read or reread the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Kevin?
So I have it on like an audiobook format. So back when I had to commute every day, like sometimes I'd listen to music, other times I'd kind of just, you know, start playing it. Like, because the fun thing about this, and this is also kind of to your point earlier, Justin, about like the story, right? Like The Office, you feel like it's not exactly a story. In that same way, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, there's like very standalone segments with like recurring characters. So it's also episodic in that way, right? So like I don't necessarily have to listen to it end to end again. Like there are very specific like sub stories within the overall collection that I really enjoy listening to. So like the arc where the Battle of the Red Cliffs, right? Like the lead up and kind of the post situation, like that's all very fun. Listening to how the different like characters are interplaying and all the thoughts and emotions going through their heads, how they looked at the situation, what their attitudes were. It's just a really fun mental exercise for me.
Interesting.
Who's up?
Do you
Who's up
listen to it in
next?
Chinese or English?
In Chinese. I listen to it in Chinese.
That's legit.
Yeah.
Is it only in Chinese?
I think there are translated versions. I have never attempted to read one of the translated versions. I imagine it's a similar feeling to when you read the Odyssey, right? Like, because they're all like translated versions, right? Like you get it, right?
Right.
But it becomes so much more richer when you kind of have either the cultural context knowledge yourself, or you kind of have someone kind of deconstruct a lot of the different elements for you, right? Like it's still a great story, just kind of on face. I think it's just it gets so much better. Like I mean, by now I've listened to basically the whole thing 3 times, right? And like the kind of my experience in relationship with the story evolved to where the first read through, there were some segments I had heard about, and like it was really fun to like listen and focus on those segments in detail for the first time. And so the other segments with minor characters, like I kind of just glossed over like who's A, who's B. Like there's so many characters. It's actually insane because they all start dying, right? Like it's almost kind of like Game of Thrones. In fact, when I first saw Game of Thrones, I thought it was like, dude, if they could turn Three Kingdoms into like a Hollywood production, like it's got a much better plot in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm taking that to my company right now.
Yeah, like
Damn.
they've tried it in the
That's high
past.
praise.
Like, and they've tried doing like live action versions of in the past. Like they're okay, but I just don't think they had the special effects production budget that I think Game of Thrones had. So like it didn't, like they weren't really able to bring a lot of things to life. It was all really muted. It's like like the colors were muted, like the characters were there and they did the best they could with what they had, but I just think the overall layers of plot, like how things developed, was just really amazing. So that was like kind of the first time I only focused on like the really big plot points, right? So like I don't know what's like a Game of Thrones equivalent, right? Like there's always like some major turning points, right, in the plot.
Yeah, like finding out Jon was the Targaryen, right? Like
Right.
if you had paid attention.
Spoiler
in all the
alert.
previous seasons.
Yeah,
It's
kind
not
of
worth watching anymore anyway.
I wasn't gonna start.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
don't worry.
the stuff immediately leading up to that and kind of the stuff that immediately followed that, like I focused on a lot of those sorts of points. It's only the second time through that I kind of got a better sense of how people got to where they are, like how they started off with 18 warlords all united against like the one usurper, and then how that alliance crumbled and all the like little factions eating at each other. Like I started appreciating the broader context. And then on the third kind of read through, I really started noticing all the small characters, because by then I was familiar with all the big plot points of big characters. And it's really fun because like this character will just be introduced for this episode and then die in that same episode, but he has a really interesting kind of interaction with a long-standing character, and it at once builds kind of the story of the main character, but also kind of makes you wonder about like, oh, if things had turned out slightly differently, could this person have turned out to be a main character, right? Like it's just like each time I explore it more, it always leaves me pleasantly surprised at kind of the depth.
Sounds like a badass series. Damn.
Yeah, it's
I
like those.
I wish I could understand
Matryoshka
Chinese now.
It's like one of those Matryoshka dolls, the Russian dolls, right? Each time you like open up, it's like, oh, you got another one in there, right?
All right, what about you, Ozzy, Justin? What do you guys got in mind?
Okay, yeah, I can take it. When I first heard the prompt, the first thing that came to mind for me was not really a specific story, but kind of the class of stories that belong to like the buddy cop film. I don't know, like I guess like, I thought of like Rush Hour. I also thought of Mice and Men.
Movie.
So I mean, both of these films, I mean, they're pretty, like they're very different, right? I mean, one was written by George Steinbeck in like the 20s or the 30s, and another is, Rush Hour, which features Jackie Chan, Chris Tucker. But these are two of my favorite stories, and I think one of the common threads between them is this, like, it's the buddy cop idea that like you have two people who are very different, come from very different backgrounds, and kind of those differences, and they share their time together, and you see like a rich relationship between the two of them. Of Mice and Men is a bit more a bit sadder, right? Kind of like the trajectory.
Bit sadder?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to.
I don't remember the story.
Yeah.
Does someone die at the end?
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Think of the rabbits. Think of the rabbits.
Is that the one where the guy shoots the other guy in the head?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because,
that was.
Some people are coming to kill Lenny because of what he's done to.
Probably terribly.
Yeah. And so that's George trying to taking care of his friend. Think that this is like a better fate for him. Yeah, but I mean, in contrast, I mean, Rush Hour is like a lot goofier for sure. But I mean, I just feel like both of these stories kind of speak to like I don't know, just this beautiful friendship that can be had between two very different people, and like the great lengths that you might go for these friendships. Like in the one case with Mice and Men, I think that's like kind of it's a pretty like hollowing that he does at the end, but it's he does it for him ultimately. But then Rush Hour, they like have each other's backs, and Rush Hour 2 and 3, and it's just like, I mean, they come from very different backgrounds. It's so different, but like the fact that they have this like kind of shared history, this shared experience of whatever the guy's name is in Rush Hour, the old white dude. I don't know. They sort of they build on that, and the buddy film, I guess, was
The bond between men
A bond between two heterosexual men.
with nothing to hide.
How often do you think these friendships happen in reality? Do you think this is like an idealized thing, or is it? Like
I don't even think it's. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing it, but I just think it's about friendship in general. I mean, like, it's it'd be friendship between, like, I guess with George and Lenny, they'd probably grown up together for a long time, or they had been together for a while, and they had this dream of living off the fat of the land together or somewhere. But then, like in Rush Hour, this friendship is a little bit, later on in life, and maybe a little bit more randomly. But these friendships can come from anywhere. I guess I don't know. I called it like the buddy cop film, but I think it's more about broadly
Male companionship.
I mean, it could be about male companionship. I just
Wait, do you like 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street,
Oh God.
Shanghai Nights?
I do like Shanghai Nights. Yeah, I think that's more. I think
All excellent buddy cop films.
Yeah, I think I like Shanghai Nights maybe more because of Jackie Chan. I don't know. That was one thing that came to mind.
I can't remember, but in Of Mice and Men, did the two guys know each other for a while? I can't remember.
I think so. I don't remember either.
Yeah, because Lenny was supposed to be like a small, clever guy, and Lenny was like dumb but strong, so they were like kind of balancing to each other.
Okay, because at least one, I guess difference between. I guess I could say with Rush Hour. Rush Hour was more kind of a. I mean, they developed a friendship, I guess, a lot quicker. But it might be just because of the dangerous experiences that they've been through. They're like trauma brings people together pretty easily. Yeah. But I guess in our lives, it's more like, we have a friend that, that we've spent time with like considerably. So I think there's a difference between that. Maybe like the Rush Hour friendship is a bit more, artificial, maybe less realistic.
Maybe, yeah. It's definitely exaggerated, kind of the whole story and what they go through together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's my answer. I mean, I don't know. It was really hard for me to like pick a single story. Like, there's a lot of books and movies.
Yeah, I mean, you could like a lot of it for different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So, some honorable mentions that I would just like to get out there. To Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite book of all time.
Bro, is high school English class your source of all your favorite stories?
I'm about to say.
What's wrong with you?
I read
Grapes of Wrath, Romeo and Juliet.
I read To Kill a Mockingbird junior year of college.
What?
Wait, you weren't required to read it in high school?
I was
voluntarily?
Interesting.
Yeah, voluntarily.
I actually don't remember what that was about either.
To Kill a Mockingbird, duh.
Oh yeah. Oh wait, there's a guy that was on trial or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a sad ending, right?
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which one of these English literatures ended in something happy? No, they just wanted to fucking depress us in high school.
Romeo and Juliet, dude. Happy ending for sure.
How was that a happy ending?
The two selfish brats off themselves. It's handled the problem themselves. The two families are like, shit. All right, whatever. No big war.
I've actually never read it. I've just heard the story.
Yeah, same.
Back to your original two stories, it's kind of like, if we were to boil away everything else, he said a story about friendship. And like, I guess my question to you is that something that either you feel like you've developed in the course of your life, or is it something that you're looking for? You think it's something you you would like? Like, I guess, why does that type of story about building a close friendship through maybe hardship or what else like really call out to you? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. I care about my friends, and like at least with Of Mice and Men, like that story in particular makes me think about like what I would do for my friends. And like
Wait, whoa, yo, let's calm
No,
down
I mean,
here. Yo,
I know,
Ozzy, we're not friends anymore, bro.
so that's the thing. I think because I think the George Lenny story really pushes that question. Like,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, is he doing it for Lenny? It really feels like it, right? Because you know, Lenny's gonna suffer other like this horrible death otherwise, and so
Yeah.
almost in some way their friendship, you know, it transcends Lenny's death, right? Like it's not about that anymore. Even I don't know. It's kind of the boundary that it pushes on like the question of friendship was what really struck me when I first read it. And so yeah, I mean, I guess as far as how I think about it with regards to my own life, what do I do for my friends, and what am I willing to do for my friends? Am I willing to do that for my friends? I don't know. I mean, it's just that's kind of how it personally.
So
affected me.
I actually feel like that leads pretty well into my story. Because yeah, I like you had a pretty hard time picking any one story. But I felt like it was easier narrowing it down to like a book or like not a show or movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty basic, so I'd probably say Harry Potter.
Oh boy.
And
Wow.
it doesn't immediately. Okay, yeah, I know. In recent events, she's
Yeah, we
canceled or
canceled.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we canceled her, so we could never speak her name again.
Wait, why did
Yeah,
we
Harry
cancel
Potter. Who wrote
J.K.
it?
Rowling?
She's you go on Reddit on Out of the Loop, and it'll explain it to you. But if we're looking just strictly at the story, it's probably the series I've read the most in my life. Like I probably could not count how many times I've read the entire stories end to end. Kind of like I've kind of been itching to read it again because it's probably been like 7 years since I have. But it's like back to back. Like I would read Harry Potter through. It was like Mel's in the Office, right? And yeah, similarly to Ozzy, like it just really speaks to me. And I think I don't know if it's like maybe if I had read like I don't know Lord of the Rings at the time, maybe Lord of the Rings would be that story for me. Maybe it was just the time in my life that I read. But Harry Potter just really resonated with me because of like the world. None of it internally really makes sense. Like they have all the solutions to most of the problems in the world. It's just have you guys heard of the trope Reed Richards is an asshole?
Ooh.
It's like so in TV Tropes, which is like a big site that compiles like common ideas and themes and shows. There's something called Reed Richards is an asshole because Mr. Fantastic and Fantastic Four in the Marvel universe has fixed basically every problem you could think of. He can fix global warming, he can fix world hunger, he can fix the energy crisis, he can fix like World War. But in their world, all of these problems still exist, even though he has these incredible solutions for all of them. And the only conclusion you can make with the world still being like it is and Reed Richards having the cure is that Reed Richards is an asshole. Right. So similarly to Harry Potter, right, it internally doesn't make sense that they have this incredible magic that could solve lots of different things in the books, but they don't for some reason. But in spite of all that, I think it's an excellent book series. And to Ozzy's point, I think it really helped me define especially growing up, like what friendship really means, right? I really did see it as like kind of like Harry, Hermione, Ron, just sticking together no matter what, and Harry ultimately being willing to die for everyone he cared about, right? Like self-sacrifice being the greatest love. That I feel like is a big challenge, right? For what are you willing to do for your friends, right? Like I mean, it sounds horrible, but I think it would be a lot easier to shoot your friend in the back of the head than to shoot yourself in the head for them, right? Personally, at least. Maybe just because I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was like a really powerful series and spoken to a lot of people. I think for a pretty strong reason, and like I don't mind all the stuff that she adds to it through Twitter and like her conversations, but not the stuff recently. I don't know what that was about. But like the whole like for instance, her saying Dumbledore was gay a couple years after the fact, I thought perfectly fit within the narrative of the story, right? Like why else? Again, the theme of friendship. Like he loved Grindelwald not only as like a friend, but like as a lover or boyfriend or whatever. and that's why it made it so hard to face him later on, right? It's like the shame, it's like the pain at having like when do people ever like confront their friends and like get into fights with their friends and then like, you know, make up later or confront them again later? I don't know. But the consistent theme of like strong friendship throughout the series, just like so strong. I don't know. You've all read it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I have.
I've read the first book.
You're
I've watched like 4 of the movies. The first
we're
4
gonna
movies.
take your American citizenship back. You're the worst.
It's not an American book.
Yeah, actually.
Okay, and
At that point, just take all of my citizenships. You know?
well, why didn't you read further past the first book? Were you just too old by the time?
Okay, so
you would've got-
I was gifted the first Harry Potter book 4 times as a kid. 4 times.
That's hilarious.
I think they still have the copies at my parents' place, but I just like I remember reading like the first half of it. I must have been like 10 or something. I just like wasn't into it. I don't know. I didn't like. I wasn't really that interested in the entire like fantasy world building aspect of it. Maybe I didn't have any friends, so I didn't care about the friendship aspect.
Oh no!
I don't know. But I mean, I remember.
Maybe it was the opposite. Justin had so many friends. So he was like, "What? An orphan with problems making friends? I don't know what this is about."
I don't know. I just
the book in the trash.
I remember the book.
Dude, like what struggle?
I was into book series with like similar themes, right? Like I was really into Series of Unfortunate Events, which is also about like some kids going through like some really hard shit and like sticking together, you know, and there's a lot of moral lessons there. I was into Artemis Fowl, which has its own like.
Oh, they have a movie.
They
or
do
series,
Netflix
something
series,
on Netflix
series.
now.
Wait,
Yeah.
they have a Netflix series?
Yeah, no,
I
it
don't think
just
it's
came out.
yet. Oh,
No,
yeah.
I think it's out. Like no, it's on Disney Plus. It's on Disney Plus.
No, that's not a series. It's a movie.
It's a movie. I guess
It's a movie.
I don't know. Well, I was really into Artemis Fowl, you know, and Aragon. Well, I just
another
couldn't.
good one.
I don't know. There was something about Harry Potter. Maybe it was me like being like a anti, you know, a hipster, like anti-Potter. It was just like, oh, everybody likes Harry Potter. I'm gonna be like that cool guy who doesn't like Harry Potter. And people are gonna ask
Yeah,
me
dude,
why.
Aragon, real hipster. No one read Aragon, man.
Okay, it wasn't as popular as
Yo,
Harry
could-
Potter.
I still haven't finished that last book.
On the aside, I got a PM from Christopher Paolini on Reddit. I like messaged him at one point. And I was like, "Yo,
That's
I loved
crazy,
Aragon when I was growing up." No, I can send it to you guys. It's crazy. Like I
wild.
lost my shit when he replied to me. Yeah. Star Wars mixed with Lord of the Rings. Such an iconic book series.
Is that what
What did
people
he
call
say?
it?
Oh,
Or was it just that he replied that you were excited?
Yeah, no, he sent a message back saying, "Hey, I really appreciate it, you know, for being my fan or something." Here, I'll just find it.
Oh, okay.
While we're talking. Yeah.
I thought he said something
What about you?
hilarious, and that's why you.
Wait, no, hell no. I just was sucking his dick, you know. I mean, I was kissing his. I was being a fan.
So I have a question for you then.
but-
Like there are a lot of kids' books about magic and, you know, characters who go through something difficult and have friends that get them, you know, through it.
The power of friendship.
Yeah. What combination of things do you think it is that has made Harry Potter the children's book?
Yeah,
What
so
about
I
college
have
and
some other books like in the same vein on my like childhood bookshelf right next. Like, do you guys ever read the Magic series? MAGYK. They just misspelled every title, right? So another one's FLYTE. But yeah, like same vein. There's like tons of like young adult Magic series, right? I don't know. I feel like her, like, even reading like the passages back, like I think they've aged pretty well in terms of writing quality, and also the fact that she started with the end in mind, right? Like the things from the beginning matter to the things at the end. There's like a lot of continuity. The world building feels very magical, right? The names I feel like the names are perfectly whimsical. They're not too out there, right? Like we started watching the show on Netflix called The Dragon Prince, and the first thing they say is like, "We're in a land called Zadia." And I was like, what the fuck is this extra magical Dungeons and Dragons bullshit? You know, it's like, no. For her, it was like whimsical and fun and not too out there. It's like magic that people who like those worlds can appreciate, but also people who aren't into it can get into. And like, I don't know, I feel like the characters also feel pretty real. Like Ron's kind of stupid and hungry. Harry's kind of stupid but brave. Hermione's a nerd, right? I really didn't like that she was like, oh, you make your destiny whatever it is, and like the whole cool theme with Neville being a potential savior as well, but because Harry was one chosen by Voldemort, he ended up being the savior. I thought that was really cool because like the whole your destiny is not really written in stone, even if it appears that way. But then it's like year one, you walk in the hall, put on the hat, you have 25% chance of being evil for the rest of your life, no questions asked.
Well,
Right.
Harry
So,
decided
Wait, hold up.
to
Just
do
because you're
that for him.
Slytherin doesn't mean you're evil. Hold on.
No, that is right.
hold
Like, 'cause look
up,
at the
hold
final
up.
battle.
Nah.
The final battle, McGonagall looked at everyone Slytherin. She was like, "Y'all canceled. Go to the dungeon." Y'all, you remember that
Well,
shit?
but that's
She
just
wasn't
'cause
like
they
she wasn't like
chose-
no.
but that's 'cause they
Oh, you're
chose
telling
to be that way.
every
you
single
know?
one. No, see, that's what people say. Like when they're bigoted against certain groups, right? What the way I see Harry Potter is, it was written by the victors who were not Slytherins, right? So McGonagall had no subtlety. She wasn't like, all y'all who are allies of Hogwarts stay, and if you don't want to stay, you go to the dungeons. She was like, nope, you as a group, Slytherins, whether you had a choice when you made a choice when you were 11, who makes moral choices when they're 11 that determine the course of their adult lives, right? He was like, you wear green, you go to the dungeon, no questions asked. Like that's some tyrannical shit, you know? Like,
Yeah.
So I just feel like I felt like that was the worst. Like one of her big themes was self-determinism, right? And like the Sorting Hat was like, nah, fuck you, you're gone.
Maybe, but there are
Sorry,
some
well-
good Slytherins out there. I mean,
Like Slughorn, kinda.
yeah, like Slughorn, exactly.
Yeah. Like the best like young Slytherin was Draco, whose character redemption arc became less shitty at the end.
Yeah. Hey, that's how it
Right?
starts, though. You gotta. It's baby steps, you know.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like if you took some cues from Avatar, like in that character development, and ported it into the world and magic and the fantasy of Harry Potter, I feel like you'd have an excellent
Yeah, but that only happened with
for
one
the
character
age of
in
the
Avatar,
series.
you know. You know.
No, all of the Avatar characters have excellent growth. I think, like all the main characters at least. You know, Aang has this like deep insecurity with like letting his people die, and he has to come to terms with his guilt and his anxiety, and he has to be better than he is. Right? Katara.
I don't think
wasn't
Katara or Sokka. Oh, yeah, no, Katara does have some. I don't think
Katara
Sokka
totally does,
changes
right?
very much. I don't think
No, he
Sokka
does.
changes at all.
You don't think
I don't
so?
think so.
I think
No.
well, he was super sexist to begin with, right? And then he
Yeah.
got
Okay.
by a
All
bunch
right.
of
That's
women.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair
and
enough.
he was
Okay.
also his whole point was I need
Okay.
to be brave and prove myself as a man, right? And I think at the end it was way more important to just like back his friends up and get the mission done rather than his own ego, you know.
And so, in contrast, you think the Harry Potter arcs are weaker? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think they're weaker. Yeah, I'd say like,
You're saying the character development's weaker?
but
Sure.
like weaker than Avatar, right? Which is like
Okay.
such a high bar in my opinion. But
Interesting.
you know.
I mean, just like off the cuff, I mean, I feel like Ron undergoes quite a bit of development, right? Like the insecurity that he has being the youngest child and looking up to Harry and stuff and coming to terms with that.
Yeah, but he's still kind of a bitch by the 7th book, right? He's
By the
still kind
seventh
of
book, he still is, yeah.
yeah, right. You're still like that. I don't know. I was really angry at Ron in the 7th book.
Yeah. Hey, it was the damn
I could see what you're saying.
Yeah, but then Hermione was pretty much the backbone of the team the entire series.
Yeah, she's just OP.
Harry was
That's
brave.
it.
Yeah, no, actually, like Harry was kind of OP. Like Harry was like innately brave and strong and selfless
Yeah,
the whole
but
time.
he's got like a hero saving complex or whatever. I guess that's a fault. I don't know.
Yeah,
what
but
do
does
you
that
mean?
change?
I
Like,
mean,
does it?
You know, the thing in like the 5th book. So I rewatched the 5th movie recently. I kind of forgot what happened, and yeah, the whole plot is that like Harry wants to go and save Sirius,
Yeah.
but Sirius wasn't actually there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harry's got this complex that he has to save the day. I mean, like, you know, Sirius is taken.
I don't think it was like I don't think it was. I mean, I guess I don't know if you maybe I'm still not understanding what you're saying about like hero saving complex. I think it was just more about this dude has no family and he's about to lose the last part that he could consider family. You know.
Mhm.
That's true.
I don't think it was more of like, yo, I need to save someone. It's like this is the last person I can call family that is alive. You know, so I wouldn't do any kind of thing. I'd just be like, let me go and save this person, and I don't care if I can't get a team together, and I don't care if I go die for it. You know, this is the last person that I can relate to.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's true. And so, actually,
Yeah, that's
while we're on the topic of Harry Potter, so I know I've mentioned this to Alan before, I don't know about the other guys, but there's this podcast that I've been listening to over the last few years called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. And so I don't want to like just be an advertisement for this podcast, but basically
shameless plug.
So basically what they do is they treat Harry Potter like a sacred text, you know, a sacred text being something like the Bible or the Quran or Torah or anything like that, right? Where kind of the impetus for this is the idea that like for many of those texts, for like people like living, you know, now, the language and like the stories of the text can feel a bit out of touch, and so there can be like very little personal relationship with some of the text. But so they try to solve this problem by choosing a text that people do have like a deep relationship with, and so they do a deep analysis of Harry Potter, and so it's basically like a Bible studies class for Harry Potter instead of, you know, the Bible, where they like chapter by chapter for each episode, and they think about how like, you know, the lesson they think about the lessons of the chapter and like what that like how that can be like, you know, what lessons we might learn about and how we can impart that on our own lives and the actions of ourselves. Because, you know, I mean, Justin asked earlier, like, what lessons did Kevin and Mellis learn from this book they read? This podcast, I think, asks a really interesting question about like, yeah, so what are the important like stories in my life, and what can I learn from them? You know, some people, you know, I mean, kind of for some people, the default answer is the Bible, but like that maybe that's not the answer for everybody. And so these guys tried to, you know, take a different angle, and they did with Harry Potter. I highly recommend it, but I also I really like this idea of like, you know, choosing a text or a story and thinking about like, you know, treating it as like something that's almost a part of you, right? That's what I think that's kind of like how they're
Interesting.
Sacred. So yeah.
So actually, Ozzy, I took your recommendation. I started listening to a few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I think after 3 or 4, I was like, damn, I feel bad that I don't do this with the actual Bible. And I started doing that instead. I was like, damn, this feels bad. All right, Justin, what's your favorite story?
Yeah, Justin.
So yeah, I also struggle with this because I'm not a known like consumer of nonfiction. So I was like, stories, you know, like I could say something generic like 1984, and everybody would be like, "Oh, you're so high school." Plus, I haven't read that book in like 10 years or something.
I don't think
so
I've ever read it.
Yeah, I don't
really
name a single character from there. Winston? That character?
Yeah,
you did it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's an Overwatch
that's the only
character.
character.
I'm so clean. I'm so clean.
And
Don't
Big Brother,
don't forget his big brother.
Winston, Big Brother.
No, that is not. I mean, like I would consider that as one of my favorite stories, but I actually wanted to talk about a story I read yesterday, just because I've been thinking a lot about it, and it is not like a conventional story. So, my grandmother is really into like the family history, and her like I guess her big life project is like finding all our ancestors and cataloging them and doing like a ton of research going back like all the way to the 15th century or some shit. You know, it's crazy, right? She's gone into like loads of detail on like my family lineage. But as part of this, it like my dad sent me this little 3-page thing she wrote, which is my granddad's life story. So she like, my granddad died like in 2007, so he's been passed for a while. And I guess as part of her like family cataloging, she decided to write up, you know, his life, right? And all the things he did. So it's just 3 pages, and it's like a, you know, chronological narrative from her perspective, of course. And I don't know, it was like, it would be, I think it's a pretty boring story to anyone else, but it like struck me from like a number of angles, right? So my granddad was born in 1939, and he grew up like in Australia. His dad was in the merchant navy, was like, you know, busy doing navy things. And then when he was like 17, he went into the army. My granddad went into the army. And then he was in the army for 20 years. And after that, he was like a mechanical engineer for a while. And he wrote some books, and he taught at like community or trade schools in Perth, and then he died. But like, it's just such a boomer story, I think. And it's like not in like the pejorative way, but like it is actually like the picture of what people think of when they think of like what the baby boomers went through, right? Like a lot of them, you know, well, I guess maybe it's the generation before the baby boomers, right? But they like, grew up with this like post-war time, right? With like this huge economic expansion. A lot of them went into the military, and they got sent off to like all sorts of different places in these like Cold War conflicts. Like my granddad fought in Vietnam, right? And that's mentioned in the story. And he like lived the army life, right? Like he like met my grandmother at a like ballroom dance, another super like 1950s thing, right? And then like a month later, he is shipped off to an army base on the other side of Australia, and he proposes to my grandmother in a letter. And they don't see each other for 11 months. They just send letters and do like a long distance call once a week, right? He doesn't even get to travel back to Perth to see her because it's too far. And then when he gets back, they immediately get married.
Is your grandfather Captain America?
I don't know, dude. It's
Captain Australia.
Like it's wild, right? I'm just
That's
like,
crazy.
yeah, like they were like they could barely even afford to do long distance calls because it was so expensive back then, and they couldn't afford to take flights because that was a new technology, so they had to take the train everywhere. I'm just like, you know, but it's just like such
today. Holy crap.
Yeah, right. And it got me thinking about like how radically different our generation and our lives are. I don't know, like, and then after he gets back, you know, they get married. My grandma has 3 kids, you know, my dad and my uncle and aunt, and they are moved every 2 years. Like literally for 15 years, they move every 2 years to like a different army base somewhere in Australia. At one point in the 70s, they moved to Singapore, and then my granddad goes and fights in Vietnam, and he's like apparently was on helicopters that were dropping Agent Orange. I'm like, I don't know. And then eventually he decides to retire, and you know, he lives a much simpler life that, you know, settles down in Perth. He becomes a mechanical engineer. He teaches, and he writes a few like books that are used in the community colleges there, and then, you know, that's it. But I don't know, it did get me thinking, like, just the difference in expectations for us versus our parents and grandparents' generations, right? Like, you know, this like entire idea of like the first thing you can do out of school is join the army, and that's how you like learn a trade, and that's, you know, just like an expected rite of passage, especially for, I guess, my granddad, whose dad was in the merchant navy. You know, the different expectations for women, you know, like my grandmother, like it sounded like she worked every now and then, but like once she got married, it was just her job to like raise the kids while my granddad was off, you know, like at these all different bases everywhere and going off and fighting in the Vietnam War and everything. I don't know. And it also got me thinking about how disconnected I've become from like this entire family history in Australia and all these cities and neighborhoods and addresses that I just have never really been familiar with, right? Even though it's like such a big part of my family history. And I guess on a broader note, it got me thinking about like globalism, right? Like how, you know, like for my grandparents, like they never had the opportunity to meet people really from other countries like my dad did, right? Like a marriage like my parents and a kid like me, you know, being half Asian just wasn't possible or even legal probably in Australia at the time. And they were so limited in their geographic like scope where they could only go places by train, and they could only experience, you know, so many different parts of the country and the world. You know, they don't talk about like going on international trips, or, you know, there was no family members who lived, you know, far abroad across the ocean or anything. Yeah, and I don't know, the generational divide and like, I guess the difference in my life and like how I've been growing up versus, you know, the shit that our grandparents went through is just, I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot since I read it yesterday, and I think, yeah, it's so radical how quickly the world has changed, I guess.
Yeah, but it should always be illegal to have a child like Justin Rain.
That is objectively true.
That's a really cool story, man.
That is.
Yeah.
They wrote letters and he proposed.
Yeah.
That's a baller move.
Yeah, dude, like they met in like November. He left for the army base in January, and he proposed 2 weeks later in a letter. So like they had known each other for 3 months, basically, when he proposed to her.
When you know, right?
Was the ring in the mail?
Yes. I don't know. That detail wasn't mentioned.
Nah, dude.
I wouldn't be surprised.
He had it wrapped around his wiener when he came back. Hey, have you guys heard the phrase? That reminds me of like, I think George Carlin, I heard it in his podcast. I don't know if he said it, but it's like, hard times make strong men. strong men make good times make weak men, and weak men make hard times.
Endless cycle.
Yeah,
Are we in the weak men cycle right now?
I mean, look at our president. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I just like, I was reading this, I was like, wow, I've had such a pampered life. You know, like they talk about being poor, like not having enough money to do like all these basic things. And, you know, it was very much like a very middle class lifestyle. I mean, like middle class in the traditional sense, right? Like they had enough to provide for the kids and put food on the table and rent like a house, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It was a working class lifestyle. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you think your story is more boring than that story? I guess it's not as. I mean, it's not over, right? Yeah, but like.
No, but you know, even by this point, you know, by the time my granddad was 24, he was already in the military, and he'd already been like lived in like a variety of places. He was married. You know, it's my life is definitely more boring. Right.
I don't know if it's more boring,
but it's more.
Can you imagine? No, but like imagine describing your life in a certain way to like your grandparents. Like, oh yeah, you know, I just spent the other day, you know, simulating an entire city over my afternoon. You know, planning out every detail of the streets and for the people to go by.
My job is not that interesting.
Or you know, you tell your kids how like on your birthday one day in college, all your friends slapped your ass 20 something times.
That's a good story. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just like there's something about like
such a great
there's just the narrative, like the expectations for men especially have changed, right? It used to be so hardy, right? Like the man would go out and be the one who works and the one who learns all the hard skills, you know, gets the money to put the food on the table.
Brings home the bacon.
And there was no concept of like, you know, living together with your partner before marriage. There was no concept of waiting so long to have children, right? It's just, it seems like such a hard life. And I don't know, like if you put me in that situation today, I don't know if I could pull off the same things, right?
You could do it.
So
you're resourceful.
I'd say if I was like if me today was thrown into that situation, hell no, I wouldn't.
Hell no. But being raised in the situation is different.
Oh yeah, obviously. If you're raised in the you get used to it. But like, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely way too pampered to have gone through like what my parents or grandparents went through.
Yeah. So I asked that question, Justin, about like how boring you think your life is now, because I actually, so the quote that came to my mind was a quote that I remember like Kevin and I had like read or discovered when we were playing Civ like, sophomore summer. It's an Alfred Hitchcock quote: "What is drama but life with the dull bits cut out?" And so, like, you know, I'm sure your granddad had a very boring, you know, there's a lot of boring stuff too that happened, right? So as you're living your life and as we're all living our lives, it's easy to think that like, wow, life's so boring, or my life is boring, right? When there's a lot of stuff going on. I don't know. I mean, at least first off, there's the news, right? But like also like on a personal level, like, you know, the stories that we made going to college together. I mean, the kind of big moments are the things that you might write about later on in a letter to your grandson.
Yeah.
You know, you just
I guess the thing that makes it sound more exciting is just like the sense of danger, right? Like the one part of the story mentions like my grandparents were on their honeymoon, and then like towards the end of it, they got into a car crash. Like their car just flipped over because someone was driving on the wrong side of the road, and like.
Yeah, but for old cars, that was just every other day.
Yeah, I guess, right. And then there's the entire like Vietnam thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, was the danger of the car crash going to be like? Was that like an impending danger that happened every day? They're like
18th time this month. Yeah,
I guess no. It's only mentioned.
I think Ozzy makes a good point, because like I think my mom's story is really interesting. She talks about like only being able to eat meat like twice a month. You know, like all this crazy shit living in communist China. And this after, like, you know, my mom's story is still ongoing. This afternoon, we probably spent like 4 hours scraping sticky residue off of our refrigerator. Like that's it. We were taking old credit cards and scraping sticky shit off the refrigerator.
Wait, you were using credit cards?
Yeah. We were using like old expired credit cards and gift cards.
I love that.
Right? Bro, and we were crouched there like idiots. Oh yeah. Let me just take our new refrigerator and scrape steel wool on the stainless
Oh.
steel and just fuck it up. Anyway, I kind of fucked it up anyway because I used a spatula in some parts. But if anyone ever has that issue, like text me because I do have the solution for you.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah, but
That's-
you know,
that's-
another thing that got me thinking with Justin's point earlier was like how you know, there was a generation, and I think the generation's still ongoing in a lot of parts of America at least, where like these men see themselves like men's men, right? They're hardy, they can do like all the housework that needs to be done, fix everything, do things themselves. You know, they don't exhibit much emotion, right? And I read this really interesting piece where this guy who's very much like us, he's very soft, he's very urban, he likes,
Calling me
you know, he
soft.
likes his shows and his devices and coffees,
He's
right?
a yuppie. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a yuppie, right? So he was saying his dad grew up in that culture. His dad was like a man's man, right? You know, he worked in like some blue collar job in the Midwest, and his whole article was about Trump, and he was like, you know, why is it that these men's men who really value masculinity in the way that they perceive it, right, would never in their wildest dreams would never classify Donald Trump as a man's man? And he gave all these examples about how in every single way Donald Trump like defied what his dad would have admired in another man. But for some reason those men are still like his strongest base, right? Like white men in the Midwest, blue collar jobs. So it's just interesting, right? Because like their whole story has been that of self-reliance, of hard work, of like that kind of thing, and then they that story changes once they meet someone who can appeal to them in other ways.
Yeah, well, I don't know if my granddad would fall into that category because I remember hearing he'd protested against the Iraq War when that was starting in 2003. So I don't know, he seemed like a chill guy. But yeah, no,
Wait,
I
what was
don't
his
know.
name?
What was his name?
Yeah.
Robert Rain. Yeah, and he was
Robert
definitely like,
Rain?
yeah.
Damn, that's a hard name too, dude.
Robert Rain.
I mean,
Sounds like-
people call him
he sound-
Bob, right? But,
He sounds like a Marvel character.
Yeah, Bob had
Well,
a
I mean-
square chin.
no, I remember he was definitely a man's man, right? He after he retired, he like volunteered at the Army Museum in Perth, and I remember going there as a kid on vacations to Australia, and like he literally fixed tanks. That was his hobby in retirement.
No,
Was
that's
repairing and driving around tanks.
That's dope.
This guy
Because that's
might
what he
have
did in
had
the
more-
Army, right? Yeah.
This guy might have had higher T levels in his like 80s than you do like right now.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
right.
But that, I don't know. It makes me a little like insecure, right? I'm just like, you know, if we're ever called to like go to war or do these difficult things that our, you know, ancestors did, are we capable? I don't know. I just feel a little bad that at least, you know, I can even see in my dad, like my dad took traits from my grandfather in that he's like a handyman and he knows how to fix things around the house. Like he's comfortable fixing a car, right? And I can't say that about myself. I'm worried, like, is there a limit to this like upward trajectory of like comfort that we're all experiencing where we're just better off than our ancestors were? I don't know. Will it all come crashing down at some point? Is coronavirus going to ruin it all?
No, the robots will take care of everything for us.
Like, go to war
And
with
also,
Iran. And,
like, I have to say, I really do admire Tuck and Uche for that, right? Because I feel like they have like skills that are so essential, like just like fixing cars, fixing like I feel like everything, right? Like I'm like, fuck, I have something I want to do. Tuck's like, don't worry, I got it. Or Uche's like, right, I got it.
yeah,
It's like incredible.
I don't know. I mean, like, we're just going to keep like outsourcing all those skills. We're going to keep calling AAA and shit until like.
Or we're
I
just
don't
gonna
know,
keep buying
our-
Uche Boba.
Like, are our kids going to be softer than us? You know, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wearing a hair clip to style my hair to the right.
That's what that is. I was like,
Yeah.
what's on his forehead?
I'd certainly say we're gonna keep getting softer until shit gets real rough, and we might be in that process right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we might be the weak generation who's super soft. We were coddled, and then all this horrible stuff hits the world, and then our children have to be the tough ones.
Yeah. And then I guess the other side of this that I've also been thinking a lot about is like this entire like immigration thing, right? And I think all of us can kind of relate to this point, is that like my grandmother's also sent me like other bits of like the family history and like people I'm like descendant from, right? And like me, like as an individual, I am a radical departure from my entire family history, right? Like going back all the way to like the 15th century and all of these like people in England and shit, these white
Yeah, well, I
people.
mean, if you go
Yeah.
back far enough for you have prisoners in Australia, right?
Well, yeah, like, actually though. But like everybody in my family history and all my extended family are white, right? But like I'm a break, and not only am I a break in the racial sense, I'm also a break in like, the nationality sense, in that like my family history in Australia goes back like 150 years or something, and it's suddenly I'm in America, right? And I don't know, it just got me thinking about how like, you know, the advancement of like aircraft technology and like globalization and, you know, the spread of business and stuff, all this interconnectedness is like really started to filter down to like individual families, right? Like suddenly all of our families are different, right? Because of these technologies and these opportunities that our like ancestors didn't have to go to different places and, you know, immigrate. So I thought that was really interesting too. It's, you know, interracial marriage is like a new thing. So the grand scheme of things, it's, I mean, at least in modern
that's a great
history,
point, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like the fact that your parents could have an interracial marriage, the fact that like we're the first generation who's super cool with you being whoever you are, right? It's like, I think that, I mean, that's the good
At
side
least
of
here in
being soft.
America. Let's not say it's like that.
Yeah,
It's true. True.
And it's probably becoming more introduced, I think, in other places.
So I want to just take a quick poll. How many of you genuinely feel that our generation is the quote unquote weak generation as opposed to the strong generation?
Wait, compared to who? Like compared to like our grandparents or our parents?
Well, no, so you kind of define this idea of like there's a cycle with the weak and the strong. Like, do you genuinely feel that our generation is the weak in that cycle? So Osmond says
okay,
no.
so yeah, in the historical cycle, no, but in terms of like personal fortitude against struggle and hardship compared to our parents and grandparents, then I would say absolutely yes.
Okay, so in terms of my question, you would be a yes. How about you?
Well,
Justin?
are you asking the historical piece or the hardship piece?
The hardship piece?
Oh yeah,
Wait,
absolutely.
are you asking like do we agree that like we're a softer generation?
Yeah, you personally, do you agree with the sentiment that we are a softer generation? So, yes, I know.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
I think
I don't know.
it's just,
It's hard to say. Like, I wouldn't say that. I mean, so I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it's more of the environment. You know, I think the environment was tougher. That I would say that for sure. I wouldn't say that we are as people less capable than our parents and grandparents were, because I think if we were in the same environment, I mean, we're humans. Humans do what it takes to survive or whatever they need to do. So I think we would rise to the occasion somewhat. I just think the environment was definitely tougher. I that's why I wouldn't really say we're softer. I don't know. I think if we grew up in that period, we would do the same things. And I don't really know if that's saying, oh, I am a softer person, because there's still difficulties that all of us go through in our lives. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I also think it's partially stratification, right? Like, I think, you know, the people who are doing the harder things are not it's a certain class of people who are doing like difficult jobs, right? There's like people who cut down trees, and there's people who volunteer to go into the army and stuff. And I think my family has been like on like an upward trajectory when it comes to class. They've been climbing the ladder, right? So like my parents' generation was wealthier than my grandparents, and, you know, so there's some of that, but there's also like the fact that the world is less violent than it was, right? Like these countries no longer need like massive armies, you know, where people just join right out of high school, you know, and it's like expected of you. That's not a thing anymore, right? Because we're not having as many wars. There's no existential threat of communism or anything like that. Yeah, so I think it's like a combination of those factors. But I also think, you know, if we were put in the same situation, would we adapt? Yes, I think so. Just like we've adapted to coronavirus,
sure, right?
Yeah.
But like the fact that we could adapt, I think doesn't have like, So if we took like let's say the generation that became billionaires, like let's say they started out the working class, spent all day in the mines and shit, became entrepreneurial, became a billionaire. All right, third generation out, that kid has known nothing but like limos and AC and Wi-Fi and perfect. Are we gonna really say that generation? I mean, regardless of like circumstance, that generation is just as resistant to hardship as the first generation?
Oh, I mean, the generation of the family is definitely not as resistant. But
Well, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So, right, if we're going to say there's a difference between them, obviously it's attributable to their circumstance, but I do think that more fortunate generation is softer. Similarly, like I don't know how any of you could sit in AC and say that you're not softer than your parents or grandparents, because like yeah, you're right. I totally agree. If we flipped the births, it'd be very similar. But as it is right now, the way we grew up, like I could not handle being away from Kristen for 11 months, sending doing what your grandparents did, having a phone call once every couple weeks, sending like handwritten letters. Like I'm too soft for it, right? Because of my environment.
So
Well,
I
Ozzy, why did you say emphatically no?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like kind of our concepts of the word soft and strong and resistant to hardships, I feel like they're so grounded in like these particular generations. Like you mentioned this AC thing. I mean, it's just based off of like technological advancement. Like let's compare to the times where they didn't had to deal with measles and polio, or deal with the time where like fresh food and water wasn't necessarily available. Like so like the last generation wasn't as strong as those generations. I just feel like using these words like strong, weak, and soft almost like, I don't know, it cheapens the experiences.
It's very relative. I think it's very relative.
And so what I'm trying to say here is that like the struggles of our generation are different, certainly, than the struggles of a previous generation. I would say the previous don't have the same kind of strength that the current generation has to try to enact social change when it comes to race that I'm seeing right now in our generation, right? Like something that I see is very powerful. I don't know, that's been very moving for me as a part of like, what is the story of our generation, right? Maybe we can actually start seeing some changes in how different races are treated in this country, right? Whereas I feel like that's a sign of weakness that I saw in previous generations and how they treated the race question. And so like, I just, this concept of like, what is soft, like this generation soft, like, I don't know, it weakens like those, or cheapens their experience when I feel like, we all go through our different struggles and, bouts of courage and strength. So that's why I firmly gave the downvote.
Yeah, I'd like to give
no generation harder or stronger.
It's harder in different ways, right? And it's all about the stories, right? Because like, the story of Justin's grandfather is probably a lot easier than the story of his grandfather, or like easier in this context, right? If we're going to use like that kind of language, but like there's different struggles that you go through in different generations that I think make for, different stories.
Yeah, it is worth noting that another story my grandmother sent me was of like one of my like convict ancestors who like committed some like small property crime in Ireland or something. Like he stole out of someone's house and was shipped to Australia for the rest of his life.
Holy
so
shit.
Yeah. Well, which actually turned out to be good for him because he like he served his time in Australia and then he was able to like buy land and like actually like provide for his family. Whereas if he had been in Ireland, he would have gone through the potato famine and then just lived a shitty peasant life. So it worked out. But yeah, I mean, I think Osmond makes a good point.
Avoiding the potato famine.
But yeah. I also think like people are uncomfortable with
he peeled out
this
Sorry,
idea.
I just have to say that.
People are uncomfortable with like the softness of our generation because it's kind of built on a house of cards, right? Or at least the way I think it's perceived. Because all of the things that we talk about, like not having to deal with anymore, like, I don't have to like know how to fix my car anymore. I can call someone. I don't have to know how to do a lot of difficult things. I can just get someone else to do it. That's like based on a system that I don't know is.
I'm sorry. I was laughing about something else.
That's based on a system that I think a lot of people feel like could collapse, right, at any time. Like there are all these threats, there's instability that's lurking out there, and like if things did get bad, right, then what are we left with? What skills do we really have? you know.
Kevin, what was your answer?
Ozzy's points. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, to Ozzy's point earlier about like, you know, there being different struggles in different generations. Like one example that comes to mind is I'll say like definitely like my parents and all my friends who are also Ethiopian, their parents definitely had some like struggles that a lot related to like income and just like, you know, resources, you know, growing up in, you know, more of a third world country. But I'd say a struggle that us as like first generation Americans that have been, I think, pretty hard that our parents didn't have to deal with has to do like this with this culture gap. And I've seen that happen a lot, like in like these homes with, you know, parents that are Ethiopian that have vastly different values, and we have kids who have vastly different values because we grew up here, and a lot of times it makes very bad tension in the family. And I've heard like pretty, you know, bad stories, families just like broken apart just because of this culture difference, and that didn't exist back in Ethiopia. You know, everyone was on the same page. So that's like one example that comes to mind. I think it's a very hard struggle that I think a lot of families here have gone through.
Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of interesting is that cultural struggle, like a lot of the health things and food things, resource things, are things that are going to get better and better with technology. But like with culture, you're never not going to have cultural issues with your kids or family, like from here on out, right? Because like you're always going to have things that are important to you. I'd hope if you have things that are important to you, you know, your kids having something different is going to create problems.
So I guess my position is generally closer to the I don't think our generation is softer. I think the game is changing and we're playing our game as is appropriate, right? Kind of excelling in the exact same areas as our, you know, forefathers did. It doesn't make sense today. That's not where the challenges lie. It's not where you need to focus on, right? And in many ways, I think, you know, while it might be very true that if I was put as I am today in the same situation that my grandparents went through, might not survive. I might just roll over and die. I don't want to believe that, but it's possible, right?
Yeah.
Let's consider the reverse. If they, as they were back then, were put into my position as I am now, would they survive? Not just in the literal physical sense. It might come down to that if they really can't find a place to kind of like make a living in today's society. But if they swap place with me, I don't know that they would survive in the fullest sense, right? As well as I do. It's just I'm adapted to present day society, and they were adapted to the society of their time, right? Can they handle like a situation where, yes, I'm working from the comfort of my house, but in some ways it's like Big Brother's constantly watching, right? Like my boss, like given the consulting work that I do, is kind of like, yeah, but you're not on commute. It's not like you're at home. You're always at work, right? Like, you know, that kind
The
of.
boss actually said that.
Well, she definitely holds herself to that standard. Like she's like, oh,
It's hard to be mad when they do it too.
right. But like, it's like that kind of constant, like they're on you. Is that something that they could cope well with? I don't know, right? There's another remark. I don't know if this is cliche at this point, but oftentimes, like you'll ask, like, say Harvard grads, like, you know, what do you think about, you know, your experience relative to this, like graduating class? Like, God, I cannot believe the things these folks are achieving. Like, if I had to compete with them to get into this school, I would have just failed hands down. Like, it's just the game has changed, right? It is like, you know, sure, being able to fix your car is a handy skill, right? But it's just kind of like the way things are today, it's not as handy as it might have been previously because you have substitutes. You can outsource, right? So you can choose to specialize, right? So I don't think just because, you know, if we kind of went back down to like a base level of some sort that I would fail and someone else would succeed, that they are in some way more hardy than me, right? If you play a different game, yeah, I maybe I can't beat you at your game, but if you can't beat me at my game, like, you know, really, are you better than me? You're better than me at your game. I'm better than you at my game.
I think the original question wasn't like, I don't think it's clear to say, oh, which generation's better or worse. because I think that's just way too many variables. But I think we could get to a more quantifiable position with asking who's harder or softer. And I don't think it comes with, fixing cards necessarily, right? I think, and there is something that psychologists measure, which is called resilience, right? Which does vary between individuals, right? Which varies based on your upbringing and background. And some people are simply more resilient than others, right? And so if we were to phrase the question as yeah, you guys are saying, oh, there is no such thing as hardness or softness, and there's no question, but there is a question, right? And so are we, based on our background and upbringing, as resilient to the kind of disruptions, the hardships, the physical and emotional stressors as our grandparents and our parents? And I mean, the data I've seen says no. We have way higher rates of anxiety and way lower rates of crime, way lower rates of disease, way lower rates of poverty. And there's the clear argument we're better at measuring it. But I think a physically easier world has not made us more resilient. And I think resilience is something you can measure in a median member of the population, right? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing we're going to their society, but I think that decreased resilience in our generation is something that you could probably observe. And again, I don't have hard data that our generation as a whole is less resilient, but in my observations, I think I'd probably argue that.
Yeah, I don't have any data either. And I agree with your point. Yeah, I agree with your point about kind of being clear about the definition of kind of what resilience is. And I honestly, my perception would have been that given how connected we are to kind of the happenings in the world and the social interconnectedness, that I would think life is more stressful, because you have to worry about
for sure,
many,
right?
And the fact that we a lot of us kind of cope with that, I think that speaks to the mental fortitude. So that would be my first guess. But again, absent any sort of other data or more objective measurements, that it's hard for us to say. It's just kind of opinion, which is kind of, I just wanted to gauge kind of what everyone felt, because at first I thought everyone was leaning towards oh yeah, we're just weaker, less resilient, across the board. But it seems
no, physically
sure, maybe. I
don't
know.
No, I'm thinking physically we probably lift more, so we're more jacked than our grandparents ever were. That's something to consider too.
Personally, I don't think I am.
No, you got to go to the gym, bro.
Seems like we're much more mixed bag of opinions than I initially thought, which I think is more reasonable, right? It's not as simple as oh yeah, it's just all the points we've talked about, right? It's quite a complex question.
Yeah. Well, I think my final thought on this is that an unappreciated factor here is that our grandparents, and to a lesser extent our parents, grew up under this existential threat of world war, right? There was the actual world war, which happened, and then there was the 40 years of people thinking there was going to be a world war at any minute with nukes and everything, right? And I think in that context, you can kind of understand why previous generations may put an even greater value on having these hard skills, right? These mechanical skills and the ability to lift things, because they really thought people really lived life believing that at any moment the Soviet Union would, decide to declare war on the United States, and the entire world would just revert back to how it was in the 1940s, right? Except there would be nukes flying around, and your city could be obliterated in a few minutes.
Maybe 1540s.
It's kind of at that point, it's believing that The Walking Dead is about to happen at any moment, right? And then in that context, you might understand, okay, maybe I need to know how to build a night camp and start a fire, right? And fix an engine and drive a car in manual and stuff, right? Yeah. So, in that particular historical context, maybe that's why we have this friction with our parents and our grandparents' generations, where they think we're soft because we are no longer preparing for that scenario.
The world to end.
Yeah, for the end of the world.
All right. Well, one thing that I know that this generation is worse at is probably agriculture and gardening.
Not you, Ozzy.
Which will be the topic of next week. So yeah, tune in then.